Welcome to a presentation of Whole Foods for Whole You. Your speaker is Casey McClung, a nutritionist who, after 20 years of being a vegetarian, changed the way she eats after suffering from a heart attack. She still eats a plant-based diet and has lots of important information regarding whole foods to share with us. We're joining the presentation 1 minute in.
That made the most sense to me and had the most evidence to back it up, and advice that actually runs through a lot of these different dietary philosophies is the following. Eat whole food, not much, mostly plants. Pretty simple. 3 simple statements, but very, very powerful results. Now, we could talk for a lot much longer than an hour on each one of these components, but I want to focus on that first statement, eat whole food. Mostly plants is also important, but what I want you to know, even though I am completely plant-based, you don't have to be plant-based to have a healthy diet, especially if you pay attention to those first 2, eat whole food, not much, and if you make your diet so that meat and animal products are not the central component, but they're more of a side component. So let's talk about eating whole food. Sounds super easy, 3 words. How could it be hard? But the fact is, in order to understand if the food you're eating is whole, you have to understand the difference between whole food and processed food. So let's talk about that. So what is whole food? I'm going to give you some very simple things that will help you identify whole food. First off, nothing much has been added. You think about a piece of fruit. We were talking about fruit earlier. Think about a piece of fruit. It is exactly as it was grown in nature, right? Nothing's been added to it. If you go to the grocery store and you pick up a package of pasta, for instance, especially if it's whole grain pasta, there's going to be 1, maybe 2 ingredients. So there hasn't been very much added to it. So that's one of the hallmarks of whole food. The second is that nothing good has been taken away. So nothing that's good for you, none of the nutrients have been stripped away during the processing. Everything that food came with, it still has. Also, for packaged ingredients, there are very few ingredients. So 5 or less, 6 or less. And every one of those ingredients is something that you would recognize as food. So recognizable as food. So you think about it, would your parents recognize this as food? Would you recognize it if you saw it outside of the package it was in as food? So these are 4 things to think about. And one of the things I want to stress is that when you go to the grocery store in your search for whole food, become a label reader, because the ingredients on the label will give you all the clues you need as to whether or not something is a whole food or a processed food. So let's look at the flip side. What's processed food? All right, well, processed food is made in a plant or manufactured in a plant. It's not grown on a plant. So in other words, people had to interfere and create what is now being passed off as food. It's not naturally created. Typically, the fiber, minerals, and vitamins have been removed. The act of processing oftentimes will do that. And oftentimes, sugar, salt, fat, or chemicals have been added, and you will see that right in the ingredient list. Oftentimes, the food has been chemically altered. So one of my favorite examples is a food I grew up on and loved dearly, which is Skippy peanut butter. Well, Skippy peanut butter is one of the things that's so great about it is it stays creamy, right? You don't have to mix it, and that's because the hydrogen bonds have been chemically altered to keep it shelf stable and spreadable at room temperature. If you get unaltered peanut butter, as you know, it separates, right, into oil and peanuts. So it's chemically altered. It also has multiple ingredients, 10, 12, 15, 20 the more ingredients something has that you don't recognize as food, the more likely it is that it's processed. So what's the big deal, right? You know, it's interesting in a lot of the studying that I've done, and I'm pursuing a fourth nutrition certification right now in sports nutrition. And one of the surprising facts is that the average American, gets about 52% of their calories from processed food. Why is that an issue? Well, whole foods are better because they contain more fiber. A lot of times fiber is completely removed from processed food. And fiber is important, as I'm sure you've heard multiple times, but fiber is important in all kinds of bodily functions. If you just compare brown rice to white rice, for instance, brown rice has got over 4 times as much fiber. And fiber aids digestion, and it aids your gut health. I will say one thing though, if you're not used to having a lot of fiber in your diet, it is something you have to add in slowly, because you've got to have the right bacteria in your gut to digest it. There's bacteria that does better digesting animal products, and there's bacteria that does a better job of digesting plant products. So if you really aren't used to fiber, it can cause a little bit of bloating, a little gassy feeling, but just add it slowly and you will grow those bacteria. And in the end result is that fiber will aid digestion and your gut health. There's 2 kinds of fiber. There's insoluble fiber, and then there's soluble fiber. And the soluble fiber, which is the kind that you will get in oats, beans, apples, is actually associated with lower blood cholesterol. So it actually binds the cholesterol and is very powerful in lowering that. Also helps regulate blood sugar, because fiber binds all of those sugars up, for instance, in fruit, and it actually slows down the digestion of those sugars and releases them slowly, so you don't get a big spike. If you eat processed foods, there's not a lot to bind those sugars, and so you end up with a higher, more quick blood sugar spike. Whole foods are also consistently associated with lower incidences of what's called the lifestyle diseases, so heart disease, diabetes, cancer, inflammation. You may have heard of something called the blue zones. Blue zones are areas in the world where there are pockets of population where there is a greater than average concentration of older adults, especially people over 70. And although the diets vary a little bit because they're all over the world, the thing they all have in common is their diets are centered around whole foods, mostly plants. And they have found incredibly low, if any, instances of heart disease, diabetes, or cancer. And this comes up over and over again in research. And then whole foods also contain more nutrients per calorie. And this is really important. It's important to understand the concept of calorie density and nutrient density. So if food is calorie dense, if it has more calories than it has nutrients. And I'm going to give you a few examples in a few minutes. A food is nutrient dense if you get maximum number of nutrients per calorie. And this is important because I know for me, I can't eat as much as I could eat when I was 20. When I was 20, standing still, I could burn more calories than I do now. So I find that my metabolism is slower, I gain weight easier. So I want to make sure that every single thing I put in my mouth has the most packs the most nutrients per calorie. So I'm not wasting any of those calories. And whole foods are probably the most nutrient dense foods you can eat. So it's really important when it comes to making sure that you're getting maximum nutrition for every calorie you eat. So let's explore that a little bit more. What does 200 calories look like? Well, a full plate of steamed veggies, around 4 cups, which is a lot of food, is about 200 calories. Could be a little more, a little less, depending on the vegetables you eat. But that's a lot of food for 200 calories. And those steamed veggies are packed with nutrients. They've got carbohydrates. They've got some fat, depending on the vegetable that you use. They've even got protein. And then you've got vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, all kinds of stuff that will help keep you healthy for 200 calories. You could also eat one very large baked potato, but that's a baked potato without sour cream, butter, and bacon bits, right? Just the baked potato is about 200 calories. You could opt to have a small bowl of black bean soup, about a cup. That's around 200 calories. Or you could eat almost one donut. So you could eat 3/4 of a glazed donut, maybe give a bite to your friend, and that will give you 200 calories. What it won't give you is it won't give you any fiber. It won't give you very many nutrients. It will give you a lot of sugar, and it will give you a lot of fat. So 3/4 of a glazed donut. You could eat 3 1-inch cubes of cheese. Now, cheese got a lot of fat and a lot of calories. It does have some calcium, depending on depending on the type of cheese or milk that's used to make the cheese. It could have some vitamin D, but it doesn't have any fiber. And I don't know about you, but I've never been able to eat just 3 pieces of cheese. You also could have 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So 2 tablespoons is not very much, right? And I have to tell you that oil is one of the most highly processed foods you can eat, and it is pure fat. So all you're really getting from olive oil, you're getting some essential oils in there, some essential fats in there, but you can get essential fats in a lot of different ways. And so for 2 tablespoons of olive oil, you're getting 200 basically fat calories with almost no nutrients and 0 fiber. It's different, you know, an olive is a whole food, right? An olive has fat, sure, but it's also bound up in fiber. It also has some phytonutrients. So olive oil is a very concentrated form of olives. So make sure that the food you eat is nutrient dense, not calorie dense. And whole foods, especially if you really start to shift towards eating more whole foods, you'll start getting a more nutrient dense diet. So I want to go through a couple of slides where we look at 2 different foods and we explore the ingredients and we decide, hey, is this whole food or is it a processed food? And what I want you to see is that there's a gamut from ultra processed to whole. So let's look at pasta. Here we have a whole wheat pasta on the left, and we have regular penne on the right. So on the left, the only ingredients are durum whole wheat flour. I took that right off the back of the package. So one thing about flours is if it doesn't have the word whole in it, it's not a whole grain. So if that just said durum wheat flour, that would not be a whole grain flour. It would be flour made out of processed wheat. So it's got to have the word whole in it. Over on the right, and I'm going to have to, we've got durum wheat flour, again, not whole wheat flour, and then we've got 5 vitamins added. Niacin, iron, thiamine, riboflavin, and folic acid. So here on the left, you've got a minimally processed whole food. And I say that it's minimally processed because, in fact, someone had to put those ingredients together, add some water, and probably extrude it from some sort of a pasta making device. And on the right, that is a definition of processed penne. And remember before what I said is one of the definitions of processed food is that things have to be added back in. So in this case, the very act of processing the wheat strips away the vitamins that then had to be added back in. So that's just something to think about. All right, so let's explore the humble peanut, shall we? So on the left here, we've got reduced fat Skippy. I grew up with Skippy. And on the right, we've got natural creamy peanut butter made by Jif. Usually you fall in one of two camps, either a Skippy camp or a Jif camp. I was always a Skippy camp. And if I look at the ingredients, over on the left here, there's peanuts, that's a whole food. Corn syrup solids, which I don't even know what that looks like. Sugar, soy protein, and soy protein is a processed protein, right? So they pull the protein out of a soybean. Salt, hydrogenated oils, that's an example of a chemically altered foodstuff. Minerals and vitamins. Over on the right, I have to minimize this, we've got peanuts, sugar, palm oil, molasses, and salt. So not as bad as Skippy, not as processed as Skippy, but it's still processed because you still got sugar, you've got additional oil, you've got additional sweeteners and molasses. So you've got both sugar and molasses, and you've got added salt. So we've gone from ultra processed to processed. A better choice, but maybe there's an even better choice. So let's look at, sticking with peanut butter, let's look at Santa Cruz light roasted peanut butter as opposed to peanuts in the shell. So on the right here, we've got two ingredients, roasted peanuts and salt. Not bad, right? Seems like on the right, it might be a whole food as opposed to the peanut butter. And so the ingredients are roasted peanuts and salt, same ingredients. The only difference is that the Santa Cruz peanut butter had to be mashed up and then put in a jar, right? So we've got a minimally processed but still whole food here on the left, and we've got a minimally processed whole food on the right. And those peanuts in the shell are minimally processed because they still had to be roasted. Everybody with me so far? We good, Nancy? Okay. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Okay, I'm wondering if we should open up for, just to see if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
I've unmuted everyone. Are there questions? Just speak up.
Not on here, not on me.
Santa Cruz Organic, where do you get it? It looks good, it sounds good.
It is good. You can find it in New Leaf. I'm not sure if Safeway carries it or not, but I know for sure that New Leaf does.
Can I ask you about dairy products like milk?
Mm-hmm.
Is milk processed? I mean, it doesn't come straight from the cow. It's, pasteurized, homogenized. So what is your thinking on milk and dairy products?
That's a really big topic. So
yeah.
So milk is processed in that most milk has vitamin D added to it. But the other thing you have to remember with milk is very often you get hormones and drugs that don't have to be listed, that you didn't count on because that's what they have to give to the cows to keep them healthy and to make sure that they continue to produce milk, right? Because when do humans produce milk? When you're pregnant, right? When you're feeding your children, right? When you're nursing. Well, they have to keep cows in that continuous state. So they have to give them hormones. So you get things in milk that you probably didn't bargain on. And cheese or dairy is the same thing. Most dairy is processed. You can, I have to tell you, for myself, I don't do well with dairy. Dairy and milk is sort of like liquid meat. That's one way to look at it. It's got a lot of cholesterol. Typically has a lot of fat. It's got no fiber. However, on the flip side, Many people find that cheese is a delicious food. They love it. They can tolerate it. And so to me, it's if you get your cheese from a farmer who loves his or her cows, treats the cows well, the cows are happy. They make cheese without processing it. They do it the kind of old-fashioned way, right? And you eat it and you appreciate it and you're grateful for it, it's going to be so much better for you than eating a Kraft single, right? So food is so complicated. There's not a one size fits all for me. And health has many pillars. The food you eat is one of them. The attitude with which you eat it is another. The way in which it's grown, built, loved is another pillar. There's so much to it that I'm very hesitant to give a blanket, oh, that's bad for you, oh, that's good for you, because there are variations. And that's what kind of why I focus on whole foods, because that's hard to argue with. Whole foods are pretty good. They're fantastic, actually. And, you know, when I started eating whole foods, and I remember I was vegetarian for over 20 years, and I had heart disease. And what I realized is I was eating a lot of oil, and I was eating a lot of cheese and a lot of yogurt. When I cut that out of my diet, I lost 30 pounds. I lost a little too much maybe, but you know, I'm back at a weight where I feel great, and it's really just whole foods, mostly plants, not much. So yeah, so you have to make choices that resonate with you. And if you stick to whole foods, you're probably going to make some really good choices. So thank you. That's a great question. That's a very long-winded answer, though.
It was perfect. I have a question from Ron, who is asking, are wine and gin minimally processed and that little is added to the final product?
I love that question. Well, all alcohol is processed, right? Like you have to, you take it from corn or rye or whatever, or grapes, and you ferment it or you distill it. You have to ferment it, then distill it usually. So is it a whole food? No. Are there variations in terms of the way something is made could be better for you than the way something else is made? Sure. And, you know, if you get organic grapes, the one thing you know, you're not going to get the pesticides that you get when they're not organic. There are some winemakers who add a lot of stuff to their wines. So, you know, you could go with a winery that has a lot of integrity in the way they make their wines. I belong to a couple wineries that are that way. I love wine, so, but all things in moderation.
All right, and I have another question. Could you please repeat the 3 pillars once again?
Oh, there's more than 3 pillars. I just knocked out 3 that came to mind. But one is the actual food that you eat. I mean, this is Casey's philosophy. The actual food that you eat, there's the attitude with which you eat it, right? So it really is important to be grateful for the food you have and to be grateful for the either the animals that sacrifice their lives or helped make it. Grateful for the earth from which everything comes, and grateful for the plants, because even if you're a meat eater, chances are, especially if you eat beef or chicken, or the chances are they're eating plants to become who they are, right? So there's gratitude, the attitude with which you eat. There's the amount that you eat. I can't even remember what I said the first time, but these are all the different components of health where it's not just one thing or the other. It's a mix of many things. You know, another pillar of health is making sure you move, exercise. That's super important.
Okay, I'm going to put everyone on mute again, but if you have a question, I'm watching the group chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for those questions too. I really appreciate it.
And so, Casey, you'll need to unmute, okay? When I mute everyone.
You got it. All right, I'm back. All right, so we're gonna continue with our exploration of processed versus whole food. All right, so processed or whole food. Here on the left, we have Amy's lentil soup. And here on the right, we have Campbell's signature vegetable soup. They both look pretty good. You can see lots of chunks of vegetable there in the Campbell soup, and you can see some pretty decent sized chunks there in the Amy soup. So let's look at the ingredients. So Amy's has got water, lentils, celery, onions, carrots, potatoes, olive oil, sea salt, spices. Pretty recognizable as food, every single one of those ingredients. Here on the right,
Oh,
yeah, there's a few ingredients here. So we've got water, carrots, diced tomatoes and tomato juice, potatoes, tomato puree, cabbage, zucchini, corn, peas, celery, green beans, turnips, all whole foods. Now we get to bleached enriched flour, which is wheat flour, wheat starch, and numerous vitamins added back in. And then we get salt, red pepper, sugar, yeast extract, barley modified food starch, beef stock. So it's not even a vegetarian vegetable soup, which I would find to be very misleading. Flavoring, beef fat, dehydrated onions, beef flavor, spices, dehydrated garlic, and dextrose, which is another type of sugar. So Amy's organic lentil soup, that's a whole food. Campbell's signature vegetable soup, that's processed. So does it really matter? Remember, we talked earlier about nutrient density versus calorie density. You also, anytime you pick up something that's packaged, you want to think about the sodium content. So let's do a head-to-head comparison. So here on the left, a serving size of Amy's is 1 cup. For that, you get 180 calories. It's got 4.5 grams of fat, 3 grams of sugar, 8 grams of protein, and 590 milligrams of sodium. So if you're looking at a 2,000 milligram per day level of sodium, you're getting about a little over a quarter of the sodium for that day. So that's not a low sodium dish exactly. But if you go here on the right, you look at Campbell's signature vegetable soup, the first thing you want to notice is that the serving size is only half the size of the Amy's. So all of those numbers underneath, in order to eat the same amount of soup that you could eat with Amy's, you got to double all those things. So for a cup serving, you get 180 calories. So exactly the same number of calories, but you get less fat, only 1 gram of fat. But you'd get 10 grams of sugar if you ate the same amount. You'd get half the protein at 4 grams of protein. And you'd get, 4 times the amount of sugar of salt. So it really does matter. Processing adds things that you don't need, and it takes away things that you do need. All right, so how about some quick tips for adding whole foods? Now that we've explored what a whole food is and done some head-to-head comparisons, how do you get more whole food into your diet? One thing that's super important is you got to make it easy and simple. If it's not easy and simple, chances are it won't stick, right? And if you're not used to eating a lot of whole foods, then this is a habit or a lifestyle that you want to ease into. It's a journey, it's not a race. So here are some ways to make it easy and simple. These are some things that I do. I keep bags of frozen cut vegetables, brown rice, and other cooked whole grains in my freezer. Sometimes I will make a batch of beans, for instance, parcel them into individual kind of can-sized servings, which is 1.5 cups, and I'll freeze those. And then for work, I'll put a bag of frozen beans, about 1.5 cups of frozen broccoli, and some frozen rice in a container, put some salsa on it, and take that for lunch. Super, super easy. Batch cook. Make enough to freeze in single servings or enough to refrigerate for a few days. So you can make a big bowl of whole food chili and then just make enough so that you've got some for a couple of days, maybe pop some in the freezer. If you love to make spaghetti sauce, that's another thing that freezes well. This is a go-to for me. I keep whole grain pasta and jarred low sodium marinara in the pantry. I think my marinara could stand to be have a little less sodium, but you can find low sodium marinaras out there. All you have to do is go to your computer and search low sodium pasta sauce. But I keep that on hand all the time because I know I'm going to have a very delicious, fast, whole food dinner. And my secret trick is while the pasta is cooking, I throw a few handfuls of spinach or collard greens or chard right into the water as the pasta cooks. And by the time the pasta's done, the veggies are done, I strain it all together, top it with sauce. It's a great way to sneak in some greens. And it's super easy. One of the keys to being able to do that, though, is to have greens ready all the time. So I always wash, dry, and store my fresh greens as soon as I get them home. And then I store them in a salad spinner. They will keep fresh and ready to toss into anything you want for up to 7 days. I kid you not. And then pump up your salads. Add carrots, celery, peppers, beans, fruit. The sky's the limit. And if you need some added inspiration, you literally could just type into any search salads. How do I improve my salads? And you would get like probably over 1 million hits. Nancy, are there any questions right now before we go into next steps?
Yes, there is a question on how do we recognize nutrient-dense foods?
Yeah, that's good. So you want to look at, when you're looking at the ingredient label, which is really important. I am an avid ingredient reader. You want to look at the amount of calories, and then you want to look at, on the ingredient list, along the right, it will tell you what the nutrients are and what the percentage of the required daily allowance is. So if you have a food that has high amount of calories and relatively few nutrients, right? Like maybe it's 3% or 2% or 5% even of your daily recommended amount, then your calories outweigh your nutrients. So that's one good way of doing that. The other great way is that if you're looking at a food and you're looking at the ingredient list and you're seeing all kinds of things that aren't whole foods in it, that is not going to be a nutrient-dense food. It's probably going to be a more calorie-dense food. But really look at the percentages on that label. That will help guide you.
Okay, so would you say that then a piece of whole fruit or a whole vegetable, is that automatically nutrient dense or not?
I would say there's more nutrient dense than if you had the juice from that vegetable or fruit, but not all fruit is created equal, right? Fruits have different levels of sugar in them. They have different levels of calories in them. They are bigger or smaller, right? So some of your but all things being equal, and I think everyone understands that, whole fruits and vegetables, whole grains are going to have the most nutrient dense kind of POW for the package than anything else you're going to find.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any more questions from the chat.
Thank you for those questions. All right. You gonna mute everybody? Okay. Keep going. All right, so what's next? So choose whole foods as often as possible. And this may, if you're used to eating whole foods, you already eat a lot of fresh vegetables, a lot of fresh fruit and whole grains, you're there, right? But when you go to the grocery store, actually read the ingredient lists. And if you pick something up and it seems like, whoa, there's a lot of ingredients there, look in the shelves for something that is equivalent. For me, there's some very simple choices, like I eat brown rice rather than white rice, because white rice has all the nutrients stripped out of it and then it has to have it added back in. I'll choose a whole grain pasta instead of a processed pasta. And you can just make some of those smaller choices. I'll get a bag of rolled oats instead of oatmeal that's in a container that's instant and has a bunch of sugar in it. So do what you can based on your lifestyle, based on how much you like to cook, based on your schedule. Choose whole foods as often as you can. Explore new recipes. And I'm not sure, Nancy, if you added the resources, but you could definitely send it out. Yeah, I have a resource page that has many websites that you can go to where they specialize in whole food recipes. One of my favorite cookbooks and blogs actually is a blog called Straight Up Foods by Kathy Fisher. And she specializes in whole food, plant-based recipes that are also free of salt, free of sugar, free of fat. So for someone like me who has heart disease, well, I know I don't tolerate fat well. It's been a godsend for me. And her recipes are good and they're easily tweakable too. They're very versatile. So Straight Up Foods by Kathy Fisher, I recommend it. Go into your own pantry. Identify the processed foods you have and the processed foods that you tend to buy, and then over time eliminate them. Go ahead and eat them, but then just don't replace them, or replace them with something that's a little healthier. But you gotta be able to recognize what you already have on hand and then transform your pantry. Try to reduce the amount of animal food you eat, including eggs, cheese, dairy, over time. Maybe you set a goal. Maybe you're going to reduce a bit every week. Like, I'm going to give up. I'm not going to have bacon every weekend, or, I'm going to have chicken one less night a week. Because as you do this, and if you treat animals like animal products like a treat instead of a staple, you will start to build your diet around whole foods, plants, vegetables, whole grains, and it will have a transformative effect on your health. Make sure you read the ingredient list before you purchase food. I think I've said that enough. And remember that nutrient density is key. The most important, and this is, I think, the most important thing, do the best you can. Don't beat yourself up if you can't do it all at once. Don't beat yourself up if you decide you've got to have a Twinkie. The most important thing is small but consistent choices, because those become habit. And I will say, when I was a vegetarian, I used to say I could never give up cheese. I will never give up cheese. I love it. And then I had to give it up. And what I found out was that my tastes changed. I completely lost my taste for animal products. You might not want to go that far, right? Like, that just might not interest you at all. I did it because I was trying to stay alive and thrive, right? It doesn't do any good just to grow older if you're not healthy and thriving and feeling good, like you want to participate in life. And I feel like I got my life back. So do the best you can. And that, my friends, that is my shtick on whole foods. So what additional questions do you have?
Cereal.
Yeah. Cereal, what about it?
Well, there are a lot of whole grains in cereal, but you usually have it with milk.
Yep. That's true. So there are not all cereal is created equal. Obviously, the cereals that are whole grains without a lot of added sugar are going to be the best ones because that's a great way to get whole grains. I don't know if you've ever experimented with plant milks. I love almond milk and oat milk, and some people really like soy milk, but not everybody can have soy. But if you're eating cereal and the only milk you have during the day is the milk you have on your cereal, you're still making a whole food choice with the cereal, especially if you choose a healthy cereal. That's an example of don't beat yourself up, right? So, and you're probably not drinking a whole lot of milk on your cereal. So, and milk's not completely devoid of good things. You're still going to get some calcium, you're going to get some vitamin D. So I would say if you love milk and you have no interest in plant milk, just pick a great cereal.
What else? Go ahead, whoever was going to ask a question.
How do I ask a question? Okay.
You're asking it right now.
Okay. Could you give some more examples of soluble fiber? You said oats, beans, apples, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Sources for soluble fiber.
Yeah, most grains and many fruits and vegetables have soluble fiber in them. I don't have a list off the top of my head, but I will tell you what I will do is I'll email a great list of examples of whole foods that have soluble fiber. I'll email that to Nancy, and maybe Nancy could send that out with the resource page.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You bet.
This is Maureen. So you had mentioned not a lot of people can eat soy milk, drink soy milk. I drink soy milk because of the protein. I'm a vegetarian also, and I really enjoy soy milk. So could you comment on plant-based milk?
Sure. I'm not, I think plant-based milk is pretty amazing. Soy milk is good because soy is a great form of protein. It's not my favorite, so I tend to go for oat milk or almond milk. A lot of plant-based milks are fortified, meaning they have things like calcium and vitamin D added, same as milk. Milk is that way as well. And all plant milks are somewhat processed, right? But you're gonna get zero cholesterol with whatever plant milk you drink. You're not gonna get all the fiber that you would get if you had a whole food. But if you get one that's fortified, it's actually more nutritious than cow's milk. So soy milk, oat milk, there's hemp milk, it's almond milk, all good. I like oat milk because it's got a more neutral flavor.
Thank you. And I wanted to go back to cereals again too.
Sure.
Ones that I eat are like grape nuts, Special K, that type of cereal. Is that considered a good whole grain?
Yep, absolutely.
And even some granolas?
Yeah, some granolas, right? So granolas, not all granolas are equal. You do want to look to make sure that there's not too much fat or too much sugar added in. But granola, has got the fat mostly from granola. Actually, oats have some fat in them, but that usually comes from the nuts. But granola is a great source of fiber. Oats are kind of a superfood. So,
thank you.
Hi, this is Jeanette, and I'm sorry to come in late. I was wallpapering my shelves, and I totally forgot.
We're glad you showed up.
Yeah, thanks. And you may have talked about eggs, but eggs have always been so controversial. Used to be they were great, then they weren't good, and now they're good again. What do you think about them?
Well, as a reminder, you are talking to a plant-based person. So,
Right. Okay.
right. So what are the positives of eggs? Eggs are a very high quality source of protein, right? That's probably the biggest seller. It does have some vitamins, but also eggs are high in cholesterol and they have no fiber, right? So, and if you get your, all right, so if you get your eggs from a local chicken, right? Or maybe from your own chickens, you fed the bird, you know how the bird has been raised, if it's a happy bird or not a happy bird, all of that goes into that egg. So if you get a commercially produced egg, and the egg industry is pretty horrifying when it comes to the conditions that the chickens are raised under, you're going to get all that in that egg. Plus you're going to get whatever hormones they were fed, whatever drugs they had to be fed, because they do oftentimes have to be fed lots of antibiotics just so they don't die. You're going to get that in that egg. So this goes back to, there are lots of different things to think about. If you get eggs from your next door neighbor or your own chickens, I say enjoy that egg. Know that it comes with cholesterol. Don't make it the main part of your diet, but love that egg, because you are going to get some great protein from that egg and some vitamins from that egg. As you can see, I am not an absolute black or white type of person, because I think that there are many different factors that go into health.
All right. Any more questions?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Emily.
I'm on an iPad, so I can't see anybody but the speaker. But I have a great recipe for cooked cereal, oats and quinoa combination that I make with 5-minute. Is 5-minute oatmeal steel cut and 5-minute quinoa. Has that been processed so it's not so hot?
Understanding is that it is like either smaller flaked or partially cooked already, but that is so minimally processed, and those are two amazing grains. So
And when I make it myself, I add some toasted walnuts and blueberries, and it's my most healthy thing I eat by far.
It sounds amazing.
It doesn't require any milk then, because it's already, it doesn't need any liquid added to it.
What I would say, Emily, is look at the ingredients on the package. There's probably nothing other than quinoa and oats in that, but every manufacturer is a little different. So look at the back of it. And if it says quinoa and oats, then nothing's really much has been done to it.
Okay.